Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about a project that Linda Kaloff, Tim Flatch, and I recently had published in the Journal of Environment Behavior. So for the past 3 years, Linda and I have been actively engaged in working with National Geographic affiliate photographer Tim Flatch in trying to better understand what animal images work best really in promoting conservation engagement. So historically, conservation organizations have largely used traditional wildlife photography in promoting conservation. Basically, traditional wildlife photography is the depiction of animals in a wild or, quote, natural setting. The idea behind wildlife photography is that the photographer presents an animal in their natural setting, which would ideally inspire people to want to conserve the environment and the animals in it. However, there has been limited research to identify if, when, and how these images promote conservation. Research shows that these images do actually provoke feelings, but they don't necessarily inspire people to engage in conservation efforts. So if these images, which have historically been used in conservation organizations, don't inspire conservation behaviors, then we need to think of alternatives or something needs to change. Alternatively, another type of animal photography that has gained attention in conservation photography is animal portraiture. So things like this. So this is an image by Tim Flatch that uses an array of portrait techniques to highlight animal individuality as a portrait. Linda Kaloff has long been studying how people perceive animal portraits, but this research prior to our current project has focused on looking at small targeted samples of groups like in galleries or students in a classroom and how they respond to these images. What this body of research did suggest was that people feel connected to animals in portraits, but there hasn't been really a control group or a comparison group. So about 6 years ago, Tim Flatch found this research and began using it to redefine his photography to focus on animal portraits in addition to his wildlife landscape photography. And he's actually had really good success with this. So he reached out to us. For those of us not engaged in conservation photography, seeing animal photographers like Tim Flatch shift from wildlife photography to animal portraiture might not seem like a big thing, but it was actually a big shift in animal and conservation photography networks. In fact, wildlife and conservation photography has long held to the tradition of not anthropomorphizing the animals in depictions or in photographs. So for professional photographers to create and market animal portraits directly contradicts this idea. The handful of photographers doing this currently have received mixed reviews, specifically from their colleagues within conservation and wildlife photographer networks. But the reception from the public has been clear and has been really positive. There is no denying that these images do anthropomorphize animals by placing them in traditional portrait poses. We know this. I mean, just think, when I say the word portrait, what immediately comes to mind? I doubt an image of an animal. The language and the images are embedded in human context. You probably think of your family or school pictures or that sort of thing. In thinking about the next step of this research and in working with Tim, we wanted to see if and how conservation images in terms of wildlife photography and this new idea of animal portraiture evoke motion. So we created an experimental design exposing nearly 1,200 individuals to one of 11 groups. Our sample was fairly representative. 10 groups received an image, 5 received an animal portrait, and 5 received a traditional wildlife image. One group served as the control and received no image at all. We selected 5 charismatic megafauna to depict. Each was depicted in a wildlife or natural environment, and each was also depicted in portrait. The animals include polar bears, lions, tigers, hippos, and gorillas. All photographs used were taken by professional conservation photographers who were affiliated with National Geographic, and the final set of photos selected were approved by conservation photographers really to diminish the selection bias, and because they know more about photography than we do. People were exposed to the image for 30 seconds. This was strategic based on previous studies assessing how long people engage with an image they feel connected with. We wanted everyone to experience the same amount of engagement, so we focused it and targeted it at 30 seconds. So what did we find? Well, we found that those exposed to animal portraiture report increased empathy and decreased positive or relaxed emotions. Research shows that this is the ideal recipe to evoke conservation behaviors and specifically to provoke donations. People need to feel uneasy by what they are seeing, but not too uneasy that they disconnect from the image altogether. In feeling uneasy, they then need to feel a sense of empathy or urgency to act. Our research shows that animal portraits create this ideal emotional environment where people feel connected to the animal in the portrait, uneasy by what they are seeing, and report feeling empathetic to the animal's situation. The traditional wildlife photographs did not, statistically speaking, have this effect. So, we are not saying that we should remove all traditional wildlife photography or that it's not useful at all. What we are suggesting is that animal portraiture works in gaining an individual's attention and promoting connection to individual animals. We argue that this is a form of strategic anthropomorphism, where anthropomorphizing an animal can be used strategically to educate and potentially save a species. Our future research is now looking at how this response translates into actual actions and if and when people are more interested in learning about the animal's natural habitat or seeing traditional wildlife photography after being exposed to an individual portrait. We are also looking at how portraits can be used to get people connected to and engaged with insects, and specifically in saving insects. So the next time you pick up a National Geographic magazine like this, or see animal portraits, and just think about the science behind that, and specifically the sociology guiding some of this work. This is some of Tim's photography that was featured in National Geographic last year. Thank you.